All right, so not seeing no questions, we're going to go over the revised RPA. Okay, and I'm just going to go over some of the important points of the revisions. Last week we posted a link through C.A.R. that takes you directly to all the forms that have been revised or new forms, or what we call silent revision. Silent revision means that, there were minor changes done, and it was not something that we would give a report on. So if you go there, you're going to see 30-some forms or more sometimes, but those are called silent revisions. The most important ones, I try to bring it to the association. So on the RPA cleanup, okay, paragraph 3E1, we're going to be talking mostly about paragraph 3, which is the grid, okay? Paragraph 3E1, the lone paragraph in the current version of the RPA, it defaults to buyer not paying any points. And we're talking about this part. But right now it says buyer pays no points. The new language does not have a default. Buyer needs to identify the number of points the buyer will pay to obtain the rate specified in the designated loan amount. Okay, so this needs to be filled out. It's not 0 point anymore. Agents have to put either 0 in here, 1 in here, or whatever that they think that they should put in there. Paragraph 3G, okay, 3G3. This is the important paragraph about the BRBC, the optional paragraph for buyer to use to ask for the seller to pay for buyer's broker. So remember, the buyer-broker agreement is between the buyer and their agent. Now here, the buyer is asking the seller to pay the buyer-broker compensation, okay? If the box to be checked, only necessary if buyer has a written buyer representation agreement with a broker and compensation obligation, compensation obligation, okay? And the form SPBB will be attached, and or will be attached by checking this box. Paragraph 3Q18. We're going to go through this really quick. Through paragraph 3Q18, added language to make explicit that buyer chooses the home warranty plan. Buyer can choose optional coverage as well, and clarifies the cost to the seller, the limit of the cost to the seller. So from here on, it's the buyer who chooses the home warranty. Reason for that is sellers are picking up the cheapest home warranty and sometimes doesn't cover what it should, or that's what the buyers think. All right, and then later on it creates issues with the with the transaction and all of that. Paragraph 18A. We're going to go all the way through this, all the form. Sorry, but paragraph 18A, okay, if 3G is checked and the seller agrees to pay buyer's broker, buyer shall provide seller a copy of buyer's broker representation agreement if the seller asks for it. Okay, if the seller says, look, I agree to pay your broker 3% or whatever dollar amount, if the seller asks, the buyer has to provide a copy of it. These are the top changes in the RPA. Okay, any questions on this on RPA?
Rick, I have a question on 18A. It says that the seller shall be entitled to a copy of the written compensation. Does that mean that the seller has to actively request that copy or not?
Well, if you're going to request it, seller is entitled to it. You're entitled to receive that. But if the buyer hasn't provided it, or the agent hasn't provided it, and the seller asks for it, or seller agents ask for it, the buyer or the buyer's agent cannot say no. Because they're entitled to receive it.
So what if they don't ask for it?
If they don't ask for it, you haven't provided it, you haven't provided it. Carmen, sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to change my name to Cameron now. Common mistake made, by the way. Rick, question about paragraph 18A. The amount of compensation. In the past, we've all been used to 2.5%, 3% on each side, representing buyer or seller. How do we proceed going forward in terms of, can we ask for a certain dollar amount or a percentage? What are we entitled to do? I am not really clear on that.
When you do your BRBC, that's the buyer representation broker compensation, that when you do that, you can ask for a percentage or you can ask for a dollar amount. And it is up to you. What do you want to charge your buyer? Okay. And when you are submitting the offer, then you check paragraph 3G3 and submit the form SPBB with it, okay? And it basically says, look, I have a buyer-broker agreement. My compensation, this is the buyer asking the seller, not you, that I have a buyer-broker agreement and I am paying my broker 3%. I'm requesting that you pay my broker 3% of the sales price or a certain dollar amount. Now, if the seller doesn't agree with it, the seller will give a counteroffer back, and the seller is going to say, I don't agree to pay your broker. You pay your broker. Or I agree to pay your broker only 2% or 3%. And based on your buyer-broker agreement, the difference, okay, let's say the seller says, I'll pay your broker 1%. And based on your agreement with your buyer, you were supposed to get paid 3%. Seller pays 1%, buyer pays 2%, or you can give a counter back and say, we're raising the price, but you pay my broker.
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Ira.
Yeah, so, excuse me, does this in any way impact what goes into the MLS as far as the commission specified in the MLS?
Really good question. Really good. I'm glad that you brought it up. Well, you know,
glad to have done
it. What we have in the MLS today, okay, is a contract between, or an agreement between the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Okay, the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. And the listing agent says that I will pay the buyer's agent a certain dollar amount. Okay, now this agreement is between the buyer and the seller. Okay, the buyer is requesting the seller to pay the buyer's agent. Now, if you, let's say right now you want to write an offer, comes December 20th or December, end of the year, beginning of the year, and this form is now updated, and you have this form, and you see in the MLS, it shows 2.5% or a certain percentage, and you're okay with it, you're done. You don't have to use the buyer-broker agreement. You don't have to use the SPBB. You can just submit the offer, and MLS still rules, okay? So the listing agent still has to pay you the amount of commission that is in the multiple listing service.
So,
did I answer your question?
Kind of, but so on the listing agreement, when you're filling out the listing agreement with the seller, you're specifying the total commission and what percentage is being offered in the MLS. Does anything in that contract that you have with the seller screw up anything with this language in the contract, if the buyer's asking?
Not really, because the contract in the listing agreement it's the seller paying the seller's agent. The seller's agent is paying cooperating broker, okay? But the purchase agreement is between buyer and seller, is between buyer and seller. So if the buyer is asking to pay a certain percentage to the buyer's agent, okay, that has nothing to do with the that has nothing to do with the listing agreement or the compensation that is in the listing agreement or whatever that's advertised in the MLS. However, in your buyer broker agreement, you have a paragraph in there that says if the buyer's agent, if the seller's agent is, or through any other means, the buyer agent is getting paid any compensation, then that compensation gets credited towards the 3% or whatever percentage that you're asking the buyer to pay the buyer's agent.
Okay.
All right. Vartan?
Yes, good morning, Rick. Thank you
Morning.
for this comprehensive report. The A.I.R. forms, they have a section that they indicate in there what the percentage of the commission is for buyer's agents and the listing agent. Buyer signs it, seller signs it, all the both sides brokers sign it, and they call it a day. Is there a way to implement something like that in this contracts for the future, or it's
We used to have it years ago. We used to have it years ago when the contract was 6 pages. There was at the bottom, there was a place where it says, I don't remember the exact verbiage, but there was a place where we would put in there the amount of compensation to the buyer's agent. And then it was taken away because of some legal issues and all that. Okay. So we'll see. Well, we'll see how it comes in the future. I don't see it right now happening, but I see what A.I.R. is doing. That's what we used to do, but not anymore. Mike?
Yeah, what really happens there is because of the structure, and we have the multiple listing service, and the typically commercial agents do not. I mean, yes, they can be using our form, but it's the offer of compensation, the way the multiple listings are set up in California anyway, that the offer of compensation to the buyer's broker is from the listing broker. There's no contractual obligation from the seller to do so. And in the commercial, that's what causes that change of those things. Because Rick is correct, we used to have it written in that way, but then it was separated out because who was responsible for that? And it's because that's the offer of cooperation from MLS. So that's why it's not, but from what I've heard, I know Rick's been on those calls, a few of you others, that this lawsuits that a lot of this is coming from, they still feel we're a couple of years away from anything happening. They're just trying to get stuff out there for us to be able to work with and get a little bit more used to it, because the use of the BRE as it is now is really very, very low. That's it.
That's the BRE is the buyer representation agreement. We have 4 of them, and 3 of them are going to go away on December 18th, and this will replace them. So the question is, are you going to use it? Is this mandatory? It's not mandatory.
No.
Just put it out. Okay, it's not mandatory. But if you want to use it, you can use it. I think Mike and all managers and brokers are going to say, look, start using it, practice, try, and see how it goes. Let's learn from it. So maybe we can take some advice or take some report back to C.A.R. and update the form and update the contract and everything. So when the time comes for us to really implement it, we know exactly what we're doing.
We do teach using it at our offices, and we got a pretty good usage on it. But again, it's not prevalent in the whole industry.
Right. You just have to know, because if your offer in the MLS is a certain percentage, and then all of a sudden you get this purchase agreement and there is 3G3s is marked, and they're asking a different percentage, okay? And if the agent doesn't know about it, all of a sudden the seller accepts the offer and everything, all of a sudden the seller is now liable to pay a different amount of commission. So that even though it's not mandatory, it's we're advising everybody to learn and to update themselves, because if companies are going to use it, then if large companies start using it, everybody's going to start using it too. And when we're training on using it as well. Any other questions, Ira or Vartan? Your hands are up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll lower my hand.
Okay. So now let's go to some of the revised form. Again, I'm not going over all revised forms. I'm just going to go over some of the ones that are really important and we are using it on daily basis. Buyer counteroffer, seller counteroffer, seller multiple counteroffer, all of those are going to be updated. And you see all this red line or red letters. Okay, this is the change. And language was added that the seller credits in the offer remains unchanged if the price changes. So if you have a $30,000 credit and the offer counteroffer goes back and forth and the price changes, the credit $30,000 stays the same, unless specifically mentioned in the counteroffers, buyer, seller, and seller multiple counteroffer. It all stays the same. Cancellation of contract, okay, paragraph 1B, okay, on the cancellation contract. Right now, our current cancellation, it says mutual agreement, per mutual agreement, and it's just a checkbox and says both buyer and seller agree mutually to cancel the contract. But this is issued by one party. When it's issued by one party, it's not a mutual contract, okay? So when we check this box, it says mutual cancellation. Let's say if the buyer or the seller is issuing this cancellation, it goes to the other party, and the other party has 3 days to respond, to either accept or deny, okay? And if let's say the buyer has given a cancellation to the seller and the seller does not sign or does not agree with mutual cancellation, that the buyer can come back and buyer can request cancellation on their own. So it's just like our purchase agreement, just like our counteroffer, where they all expire on the third day at 5 p.m. This is the same, expires on the third day at 5 p.m. The next form that was modified is the extension of time addendum. Now it's called the extension of time amendment, okay? And it has the same expiration. If you're asking if one party is asking the other party to extend close of escrow or times or any time frame, the other party has 3 days to accept it or deny it, okay? Residential lease after sale, okay, language was added to be consistent with the revised residential lease or month-to-month rental agreement on paragraph 5A, okay, advising the maximum security deposit that can be charged, okay. For a unfurnished property, you can charge twice as much as the rent amount, okay. Then the lease agreement has the same changes, residential lease or month-to-month. The form name has changed from LR is going to be called RLMM, okay, and also defines rental property owner or their authorized broker or agent or property manager collectively as housing provider. Okay, so, and we'll go to some other forms. Okay, so these are basically the important forms that have been revised. There is more revisions. We don't have time to go over all of them. Some of them, again, it's just minor revisions, and they're called silent revision. But if you go online to CAR.org, you're going to find all the forms in there, and should be more than 30 some forms that have been updated. Now, as far as, let me stop sharing. Any questions? I can talk about the forms that are not going to be available as of December 18th, week of December 18th. All right. So as of December 18th, all COVID forms are going to go away. There's not going to be a COVID form available on this end. We're done. Yes, Mike, that's it. We're done with those forms. We don't have to use them anymore, and it's over. Okay. All business opportunity listing and sales forms are going to go away. There's not going to be any business opportunity listing or sale form available through C.A.R. Okay. All vacation rental homes, short-term rental homes, all those forms are going to go away. Okay. And that's about it. Okay. Any questions, please?
Yeah, Rick?
Yes.
If somebody has a business opportunity transaction in the works and those forms aren't available, is that going to be an issue?
Well, I don't know. I think, maybe they need to talk to their broker and see what their broker says. I think if we are in escrow and we can do some addendums and whatever and close that escrow, or have the buyer and seller talk to an attorney and finalize their contract, or through the escrow or whatever, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But if you have a listing and then you want to write an offer, there is no form available. You can become a member of CAB, California Association of Business Brokerage, and they have the forms, they have contracts, they have everything, but you need to become their member, and you need to be able to use their forms.
But the listings will still show up in the MLS and everything else. So people just need to be aware that they may not be able to process a transaction against those listings.
Well, I think that's going to be the responsibility of the broker. Because if the broker does business opportunities, which is highly litigated, unluckily, because many of them fail after being sold, it's going to be the broker's responsibility to make sure that they have covered themselves and that they've worked with the client. Carmen has a question, Rick.
Yes, Carmen.
Yes, Rick. For vacation rentals and short-term rentals, where would we go if the forms aren't available? And
probably some property management company that they have the forms. That's all I can think about. Unless you want to use this just regular residential listing agreement or residential lease agreement, month-to-month and lease agreement, and then use that. But again, you need to talk to your broker and see what your broker advises you on. We want to get out of 2-day rental in Palm Springs.
Any other questions?
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Rick, the information you always bring us is so valuable. I thank you for taking the time. I know how hard you work with C.A.R. on this, so thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you, Mr. President.
Always look forward to it.